I've had this workbench forever, but you have something like this for long enough and you just stop seeing what's wrong with it. You just work around the flaws. So here's an attempt to uh, try to make it work a little better. The first thing that's wrong with this bench is that the top is really only about an inch thick. Only that first inch or inch and a half of the front is really 4 inches thick, where the dogs go. The rest is thin, and it's so thin that you can't use normal holdfasts with it. You can't just drill 3/4 inch holes in it and use the holdfast that you bang on. These are wonderful on a real industrial sort of workbench because you just stick them in and bang them and they hold your work down and it's super easy. But you can't use them on these because you need a good 3 inches for that. So here's another frustrating problem. Um, the chop on these front vices looks very generous. It's like 2 feet wide. But watch what happens when you try to take advantage of either end. The whole thing racks. You get very uneven pressure, not much pressure, and it's a strain on the tool. Same thing happens on the other end. It really only is satisfactory in the area between those two slides. If you want to take advantage of the area on the outsides of those spacers, you have to come up with some sort of second piece of wood to balance out the pressure on the other side. So the 4 or 5 inches on either side of those two bolts is pretty much irrelevant. Doesn't help anything, and you only have about 3 inches above the the drive screw. So it's a much more limited tool than it looks like. At the other end of the bench, you have the tail vise, which is very versatile. We'll see a bunch of ways to use it, but as versatile as it doesn't really do most of those jobs particularly well. One way to use it is to hold boards vertically, but it really only holds most wood vertically in the orientation I'm showing here. They don't open wide enough to hold a board flat. If you're cutting tenons on the end, you're going to want it facing the other direction about half the time, 90 degrees to what's shown. And if you're cutting dovetails, you're almost always going to want it held flat. This is 90 degrees off the most desirable orientation. The other really common way to use the tail vise is with a pair of bench dogs to hold a board flat on the bench top. And this does get around some of the shortcomings of the front vise, but it's kind of awkward. In practice, unless you're doing the same operation repetitively, it takes quite a while to find the right combination of dog holes and the amount you've opened the jaws to actually grip your wood. I find it quite a clumsy way to do it. It works and it's versatile, but it's awkward. So this is my little toolkit to sort of fill in for some of the shortcomings of the two built-in vices and make some operations a little bit easier while still leaving the other two vices available because they often are extremely handy. So let's take a look at these things. Most of these work holding things are built around the use of these threaded inserts. They've got big fat coarse threads to bite into the wood and 5/16 inch machine screw threads for fastening things down to the workbench top. The rows are 2 inches apart on 2-inch centers, and the columns are 6 inches apart. Also along each edge, there's these
pairs of inserts that are 4 inches apart that we'll see what they're used for. And the holes go all the way through, so you can blow out any sawdust and stuff that gets accumulated down there.
So this is a little trick that comes from the machine shop. Machinists do this. It's called cylindrical squares, which is sort of an oxymoron. But these are just pieces of aluminum bar. Again, I made these on the lathe, but I think you could make aluminum ones like this if you really wanted to.
You can easily cut them square enough on a table saw and drill them straight enough on a drill press. The lathe is sort of just a nice to have.
But I find this really convenient. You can always put a dog in the end here to stop the wood from skidding, but I've never really had it skid much. It can. Now the nice thing about this is you can pop wood in and out of here to do things like layout on it. If you're making a table with 4 legs, each one is going to have to go in and out several times. That's many different uses of the vise. So this is super fast. It also holds wood that's very long. Unlike the main vise on these benches, it doesn't just have a little 8-inch grip. You can put you can do the same thing at the far end and have work on the edges of wood that's 10 feet long if you want. So all in all, it's a very simple and easy way to do it. But I like these aluminum ones. I think they're pretty, but you really don't have to get so fancy. So it works just as well with wood.
There are enough holes with this layout that you can have quite a bit of flexibility in how you set things up with little objects, or this is not a shallow object, but especially if the workpiece were thin, you might want to have an end block that was quite a ways away. So I use these strip-like pieces to allow you to bolt it down to a hole that's a considerable distance from your workpiece, so you don't run into any risk of dinging it. The aluminum one has lots of holes in it for flexibility, and it has a pointy end so that you can attach it to things that aren't that only have a limited number of places you can wedge against it. I've always found it a little awkward when you hold wood flat using the tail vise and dogs, that it has to be parallel to the workbench. You can arrange these bolt it on dogs any way you like, and easily have the wood at a more convenient angle. And sometimes you don't want to just trust to the wood resting on 3 points, but you want to have it more positively locked down. You can always do the same thing and add an extra dog there to wedge your wood into place. You don't really need to do this very much. But it is nice to have in your toolkit. For yet another way to hold your workpiece down, there's these little screw vices. Now these just bolt to either edge of the table, either the front or the back, and again they have that same Acme threaded all thread. So you just fasten these down on whichever side is convenient. I kind of like them on the back because they stay out of the way and you're right up close to your workpiece. But you just bolt these down, put a couple of dogs on the near side, and you can hold wood very nicely. Don't know that it's more effective than a wedge, but it's just sort of a matter of taste which one you like. But it holds the wood quite well, as you'll see. And they look really cool. I made 2 of these. They're slightly different because I made them one after the other. The one that's already in place is the second one. It's a little less clunky and but basically the same functionality. You can put them on the front edge or on the back edge of the bench, or actually you could put them on either end if you had holes drilled for them as well. But I mostly use them on the back of the bench because it's sort of like the face vise. They stick out, so it's even more convenient to have them on the back side. There's really all sorts of fixtures you can bolt down once you've got these threaded inserts in your tabletop. This is something I'm using a lot now. Is this U-shaped piece of wood, and one side's higher than the other, and I put another little clamping device on one end because it's convenient for these small things I'm working on to just let that knob hang out over the gap where the tail vise opens up, and I can easily clamp things to this, use dogs and screw that little vise thing on the end down to hold work. It's all sorts of nice ways to use it in the style I'm showing here, where you have a little table space in front of it. And that's a very convenient way to be able to work on things, especially if you slide it a little to the left so that you still have the use of your tail vise. But there's a whole cooler way to use it too, which is to flip it around backwards. And now you have a sort of an apron sticking up that you can clamp things to. And that's extremely convenient to have. Here I've just got a narrow board here, but I could have a 3-foot wide piece that I wanted to work on the edge of. So that's extremely handy. So this is the last big feature I came up with, which ironically I have not drilled holes in this top for. These are meant to hold work down on the table, as you can see. They do require a 1-inch hole drilled in the tabletop. And I wasn't 100% convinced I wanted to do that yet because things fall down those holes. So, but you really can't use the traditional holdfasts with a top this thin. So this was a solution. I don't. This is not really something I invented. This is there are other things out there on the market like that. I just wanted to make something along those lines myself. It's an aluminum casting, and I'm not sure how the other ones work. I know it's probably similar, but that bottom is split, and when you crank down on that screw, it pulls the wedged pieces together, and they expand up to probably pretty close to 1/8 of an inch in total, about 1/16 of an inch on each side. And then of course you can set that wing on the top to any height you like, and there you have anything between 0 and, I don't know, 6 inches. But I haven't pulled the trigger on using them on this bench yet, because I don't know if I want those big holes. So we'll see see how they work on the other bench. Some of you may remember this low Roman workbench. It's sort of more for sculptors than pure woodworkers, but I made this video on this a couple years ago. It's got 1-inch holes drilled in it already, so these fit right in, and you can see they're real easy to use. They just a little tightening of that big knob, and they're really firmly in there. And then you can set that wing to whatever height you like and adjust up and down with a clamping screw. So they seem to work real well. There's a pair of them. So they're quick and easy to move. There I am moving them. Are they easier to use or better than the conventional holdfasts? I don't know. I think they hold at least as well, and they don't tend to shake loose. Like I find that with these holdfasts, if you're wrestling stuff around, they will sometimes pop loose on their own, and the aluminum ones don't seem to do that. Mostly they just look really cool. The one big advantage they have over the holdfasts, of course, is that they will work with a thin tabletop, and that's really why I made them. So I just have to decide to drill those 1-inch holes in the tall bench. But I'm pretty happy with them. They seem to crank down and come off really very quickly. It just takes seconds. They're kind of quieter and more gentle than using the holdfasts that you bang on. There is a pair of them. They're slightly different, not as much different as the other clamps are from each other. You can see, these. I'm sort of designing by the seat of my pants here, so they just the second one is always a little different than the first one, but I'm real happy with them. So that's it. The key thing here is that a grid of threaded inserts at a standard width apart. It's nothing magic about my 4 and 6 inch measurements. Any kind of reasonable grid would do. After that, you can attach all kinds of fixtures that make life much more pleasant in the workshop. That's it. I'll see you next time.